There are 298 people on death row in the state of Florida. This is part 2 of the series. Paul Scott, 67 years old, 44 years on death row. James Alessi was murdered in his home by Paul Scott and Richard Condian on the evening of December 4, 1978. Charles Sotullo, a witness, stated he was invited to take part in a plan to loot and kill the victim, but he declined. The victim, who was acquainted with both men, picked up Scott and Condian before taking them back to his house. On a sofa in his house, Alessi's naked body was discovered. His hands and feet were firmly bound with telephone wire and electrical cord, and he was covered in blood. Alessi had suffered injuries to the limbs, chest, and head. A fractured, crushed skull was the result of one head injury. It was concluded that the head injuries were the cause of death. According to the evidence, there was a violent struggle and the victim made an effort to free himself. Broken items could be found all over the house and the walls, chairs, drapes, and floors were stained with blood. Scott left his prints all throughout the house, including on a bloodied knife that was discovered on the sofa where the victim's body was found, and several other prints were found on the neck of a broken vase.
His name is Paul Scott and he's on death row in Florida. Paul's case is, I only bring him to mind because this is a miscarriage of justice. The man wasn't even there when the murder was committed. The man has more than paid for any pain he may have caused. That's a long time to have the shadow of death hanging over your head. Any day, the custodial officer can come to your cell with a warrant, give you the warrant, which tells you got a week or two more to live. So, you subsist with that in the background. That's not easy. That's hard. And I just think justice should be just. I think the punishment should fit the crime. I got no problem with that. But when the punishment far outstrips the crime, that's not right either. So I invite you to look at Paul Scott's website, and again, the website is listed right here underneath the picture. Go to it. See the details of this whole story. And it's an interesting one, and it's a challenging one. And if you will follow it, look into it, you'll see how justice can run way ahead of itself. Thank you.
Brian Jennings, 65 years old, 37 years on death row. On May 11, 1979, the naked body of 6-year-old Rebecca Kunash was discovered in a canal in Brevard County. The autopsy report states that she had a fractured skull. Asphyxiation was the second cause of death after being assayed. Brian Jennings broke into Rebecca's bedroom and sealed off her airways until she passed out, according to the evidence presented at trial. Jennings threw the victim to the ground so hard when they left the house that she had a broken skull. After moving the child to a nearby canal, Jennings assayed her and then held her head under the water for about 10 minutes. Earl Jackson, 64 years old, 37 years on death row. In Jacksonville, Florida, the victim, 64-year-old Linton Moody, co-owned a retail furniture store with his brother Wendell. On December 2, 1985, Linton worked at the shop till early in the afternoon. Before choking the victim with a belt to unconsciousness, Jackson handcuffed and gagged him. Jackson struck the victim in the face with a cast on his forearm when Linton regained consciousness. Jackson sat on the victim's body and repeatedly stabbed him in the chest. The victim's face, head, and neck were all bruised according to the autopsy. In addition, he suffered a rug burn on his left elbow, bruising on his kneecaps, and a shallow cut along the neck. Kenneth Quinn, 64 years old, 43 years on death row. The body of an 82-year-old woman was discovered on the floor of her bedroom on December 30, 1979. Detective Larry Lewis, the one who discovered the body, examined the victim's forearm and under her ear for bruises, her pelvis for a tiny abrasion, and her nose for dried blood. The cause of death was determined to have been strangling. 2 cuts on the victim's skull were discovered and are believed to have been caused by a sharp edge either from a tool or the lip of furniture. The victim may have lost consciousness as a result of the injuries. Although it could not be established if the victim was awake at the time of the assault, it was determined that the essay took place before the victim passed away. Ian Lightborne, 64 years old, 42 years on death row. Ian Deco Lightborne was found guilty and given the death penalty for the first-degree murder of Nancy O'Farrell on May 1, 1981. The murder took place during the night of January 17, 1981, according to the facts of the indictment from February 18, 1981. O'Farrell's house window screen was broken by Lightborne as he pried it open. He seized a few of the victim's possessions, including a necklace, a tiny silver bank, and some cash. According to sources, Lightborne acknowledged shocking O'Farrell with the incursion and compelling her to engage in essay. Lightborne killed O'Farrell in order to avoid being recognized as the victim knew him. A pillow was placed over O'Farrell's face before Lightborne fired a .25 caliber automatic handgun shot to the left side of her face. Medical professionals asserted that the victim bled to death. Thomas Pope, 74 years old, 41 years on death row. For the killings of Christine Walters, Al Dorrance, and Cesar DeRusso, Pope received the death sentence. The bodies of Al Dorrance and Cesar DeRusso were found on January 19, 1981, in a residence that Christine Walters had rented. Both had been dead for a few days, but DeRusso's body was further along in the process of decay than Dorrance. Dorrance had been shot 3 times, while DeRusso had been shot 5 times. Under DeRusso's body, a spent .22 caliber shell casing was discovered. The body of Christine Walters was discovered floating in a canal 3 days later. Her skull was cracked. It was determined that she had been thrown in the canal while she was still breathing, and then she was shot 6 times with explosive ammo. Omar Blanco, 73 years old, 41 years on death row. John Ryan was shot to death by Omar Blanco inside the Ryan's residence. Talia Vezos, the victim's 14-year-old niece, testified that while she was asleep in her Fort Lauderdale house at around 11 p.m. on January 14, 1982, a man with a revolver and something resembling a brown pocketbook was standing in the hallway. He signaled for Vezos to maintain silence. He then severed the connection to her phone and walked out of the room. As soon as Ryan entered the hallway, he made an attempt to seize the intruder's gun. In the commotion, Ryan was shot and fell on top of Vezos. 6 more shots were fired before the invader decided to flee the scene. Please hit that subscribe button if you like my channel. See you next time. Bye bye.